Hello, Mark Pinto here, Adult Services Director at Phoenixville Public Library with another library book bite. A reading from the first chapter of a recently published work of popular fiction or nonfiction, newly available in electronic format from the Chester County Library System's Overdrive service. Today's featured title is The Glass Magician, a novel by Caroline Stevermer, published by Tom Doherty Associates, and available in Overdrive Read and EPUB ebook formats at chester.overdrive.com or on the Libby app. Reminiscent of The Golem and the Jinni, The Glass Magician by Caroline Stevermer is a magical and romantic tale set in New York's Gilded Age. New York, 1905. The Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Morgans. They are the cream of society, and they own the nation on the cusp of a new century. Talia Cutler doesn't have any of those family connections. What she does know is stage magic, and she dazzles audiences with an act that takes your breath away. That is, until one night when a trick goes horribly awry. In surviving, she discovers that she can shapeshift and has the potential to take her place among the rich and powerful. But first, she'll have to learn to control that power before the real monsters descend to feast. Chapter 1. Talia Cutler, the stage magician known as the Lady of the Lake, stepped nimbly aside to avoid the singer coming off stage at Keith's Vaudeville Theater in Philadelphia. A plate spinner had already taken the singer's place, and on stage the show went smoothly on. Backstage was the usual bustle for an evening performance, invisible to the audience out front, essential to the performers. Look alive, sister, Eulalie the traitor Nightingale, known offstage as Ermintrude Ulrich, and as ordinary a solitaire as Talia, gave her a cold stare as she bumped her. Coming through. Talia spoke through clenched teeth. I'm not your sister, Trudy. Beneath her costume, she wore a pigeon squeezer, a homemade contraption that held the doves she used in her act. The singer's clumsiness had driven one of its hidden wires between the bones of Talia's corset. It hurt. Shut up, Blondie, the red-haired singer swept past. Make way for the talent. Talia reminded herself she was a consummate professional. Therefore she resisted the urge to step on the train of the singer's gown as she passed. The gown, because it was supposed to belong to a trader, was the last word in luxury. Coral silk with jet beads and egret feathers that matched Trudy's picture hat. Damaging it wouldn't accomplish anything, and Talia knew she was above all that nonsense. Anyway, she had work to do. The Lady of the Lake was next on the bill. Just off stage, inches out of the audience's line of sight, David Nuttall stood talking to one of the stagehands. Nuttall, like Talia, a white solitaire, was looking paler than he usually did, his straight black hair and pencil mustache a greater contrast even than usual. Talia tried to pick out the conversation. Both spoke in murmurs. Talia had to come close to hear them. No, Horace, Nuttall smiled, but his voice was firm. This time you're wrong. Think about it, that's all I'm saying. Horace, a black solitaire whose nose testified that he'd been in many fights, was holding a rope but had his entire attention focused on Nuttall. Deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book. If Shakespeare wasn't a traitor, how could he write dialogue that fancy? He knew how traitors like that talk, because he was one. Birnam Wood came to Dunsinane. Does that make Shakespeare a Silvestri? Asked Nuttall. Horace was offended. I never said he was a Silvestri. I said he was a traitor. No solitaire would ever be so fancy, you have to admit. On the contrary, I've known some tremendously fancy solitaires in my day. Nuttall turned to greet Talia as she took her spot beside him. There you are. Shakespeare was a traitor? Talia murmured. No, Nuttall was firm. He certainly was not. William Shakespeare was a solitaire. Just like you and me? Talia asked. Exactly, said Nuttall. If you say so. Good evening, Miss Cutler. Horace, stoic in the face of Nuttall's skepticism, turned his attention firmly back to the plate spinner at work on stage. The theater was nearly full, the audience happy but not boisterous. The pit orchestra struck up Talia's music. Nuttall gave her a brilliant smile. That's us. Together they took the stage, blinking to focus in the glare of the lights, basking in the attention of the audience. Talia felt the whole world sharpen around her. Shoulders back, head held high, she took her mark on stage. She did not walk, but glide. Nuttall's deep voice provided the narrative to the act. Ladies and gentlemen, solitaires, traders, and sylvestri, I present to you Talia Cutler, the Lady of the Lake, here to amaze and entertain you. Clad in a shining white gown with medieval sleeves, with her fair hair loose over her shoulders, Talia stood center stage and made doves appear from thin air. Talia turned cards into coins and changed them back again. She turned a wooden staff into a snake that slithered off into the wings. The audience was rapt throughout, applauding each trick enthusiastically. The music and the sleight of hand went smoothly. At the climax of the act, Nuttall declaimed, For her final trick this evening, the Lady of the Lake will defy the incredible danger of the Siege Perilous. On cue, the curtain behind Talia swept aside to reveal a simple throne of rough-hewn wood. This was no flimsy stage prop, but a solid chair with arms and a high back, approximately medieval in appearance. Above the chair was a rope and pulley rig that held a sword suspended, point down, over the wooden throne. The pit orchestra played a little waltz, while Nuttall paid out the rope to bring the sword down to demonstrate how sharp it was. He sliced an apple with it, and hauled it back to its menacing position. He produced a candle, which he set in a wrought iron stand. It was placed so that, once lit, the flame would touch the rope. Talia, with due ceremony, took her place upon the throne. Nuttall took up the manacles that dangled from chains welded to the arms of the throne. He called for a volunteer from the audience to witness that the cuffs were made of genuine steel and that the chains were just as solidly made. When the volunteer went back to the audience, Nuttall closed the manacles on Talia's wrists, trapping her in the chair. He placed the key, the only key, in his waistcoat pocket, and walked away. Talia sat tall and did her best to look queenly and brave, but not too stupid to realize her danger, while she let the audience take in her plight. Nuttall stepped to the candle stand and produced a box of lucifer matches. Ladies and gentlemen, please give the Lady of the Lake your undivided attention. The orchestra fell silent, save for a snare drum roll. Overhead the sword gleamed in the stage lights. Talia could sense the audience's anticipation. She could smell the apple Nuttall had sliced in half. When Nuttall struck a match to light the candle, Talia could smell the sulphur of its flame, and then the scent of burning hemp as the candle flame licked the rope. Nuttall raised his hands, and the inner curtain closed, concealing Talia from the audience. The drum roll continued. The moment the curtain hid Talia from the audience, she set to work. The handcuff key, hidden in her left sleeve, dropped into her hand, and with a twist and a tug she freed herself from the manacle on her right wrist. Talia could have picked the locks, but it was far more efficient simply to lie about the number of keys. She used her free right hand to release the catch that held the seat of the throne in place. With the faintest of clicks, the seat dropped from beneath her like a trapdoor, clearing the way to the open trapdoor in the stage below. All that remained was to unlock the manacle on her left wrist, bundle up her skirts, and drop through both openings at once to hide beneath the stage. With the key in her right hand, Talia worked to unlock the remaining manacle, keenly aware of the dwindling seconds she had before the rope treated to burn slowly, would part at last. Something inside the lock jammed. Talia worked in vain. She was stuck. Talia took a wild look around. The sword was directly overhead, but not for much longer. On the other side of the curtain, the audience waited, attention rapt on the candle burning through the rope. The drum roll still sounded. Talia could smell grease paint and her own sweat. Her entire focus was on the last chance she had to slip her hand through the locked cuff. It never occurred to Talia to call for help. This was her profession, her birthright. The show simply must go on. Talia dropped through the trap door in the throne as far as the length of chain allowed. The links of the chain kept the seat from snapping back into place as it was meant to. That alone would certainly ruin the trick. When the sword dropped, it would strike her, but perhaps not fatally. The numbness in Talia's left wrist had turned to fire. Stubborn to the end, angry with herself for failure, Talia was still twisting the key in the jammed lock while straining to pull her hand through the cuff despite the impossibly tight fit. Talia's arms, her whole body, went from numbness to pins and needles everywhere. She looked up, ready for the sword, angrily resigned to pay the price for her clumsiness with the jammed cuff. But Talia could not see her left hand. She saw something white, something she didn't understand. It could not be what it seemed. White feathers, forming a shape like the tip of a bird's wing. Before she could make sense of what she saw, Talia fell at last, free of the cuff. The chain, free of Talia's weight, was rigged to slide to the outside of the throne. It slithered upward out of sight. The trap door in the throne clicked shut as Talia fell into blind darkness beneath the stage. The numbness held her. She couldn't see, but she could hear. The sound the crowd made, the collective gasp of horror and delight, told Talia the candle had done its work at last. The rope parted. The thud of the sword overhead made Talia flinch. From far away, applause told her the curtain had drawn back to reveal the empty throne with the sword lodged harmlessly in the wooden seat, the empty manacles dangling. Talia lay there, swiftly becoming aware of her situation. She had arms again, not feathers. She was lying on a mildewed mattress directly beneath the trap door in the stage overhead. She was herself again, not pins and needles, not fire, not numbness. Talia crawled off the mattress, vomited on the dirty floor, and spat. She drew a shaky breath. What she had seen in that elongated second before she fell had been her own hand transformed into something she could not put words to, something with feathers. Talia knew that traders changed that way, traded one shape for another, as easy for them as breathing. Talia knew she was only a solitaire, yet somehow she had changed. What did that mean? Far above, as the applause died away, the pit orchestra took up Talia's music again. Talia found herself on her feet, staggering toward the door that would take her to the back of the theater. Nuttall would be watching for her, so he could point her out to the audience. As Talia made haste, her head cleared. She found herself counting the bars of music. If she hurried, if she ran full tilt, she could still make her cue. She must not miss her cue. You can read more of this title at chester.overdrive.com or on the Libby app. And that's today's Library Book Byte. I'm Mark Pinto. Thanks again for listening.